You're listening to Travel Tales with Virgil.
Or what I predicted happened, I didn't think to this extent. No one in a million years would think that people would take to violence, literally like the old days, with pitchforks and nooses and wanting to hang people. I mean, it's just to a level of absurdity that embarrasses the country, embarrasses me to have to try to explain it to people that aren't from this country, and it's baffling, and it's sad.
But I do remember stating that, he'd burned the village down as he left, and that's exactly what he's doing. And it's that sort of all or nothing, which I did mention previously, that really you're not going to find a middle ground in America for quite some time, because people convicted with convictions to that level, regardless of whether you agree with them or not, it's so personal now. When somebody is physically willing to take their life and risk it going and storming the Capitol and kill others in such a violent and just shocking manner, their mentality's already gone way over the edge. Their commitment has gone way over the edge, and there's such a vitriol now in politics and hate. There's literally hate in politics, and that's dangerous in any country.
You just heard Dan and Sean back for a very special bonus episode called No Really, What's the Matter with America? Season 2 of Travel Tales with Virgil comes out on the 2nd of February with a ski special with some very special guests. Now let's get back to Dan and Sean, talk about the current state of America and where do they go from here. You're very welcome back, guys. The last episode that we had was called What's the Matter with America? So I'm calling this episode No Really, What's the Matter with America? Please answer that.
Well, it's really difficult, Virgil, to try to put your arms around, even if you watch the news every day. It just so happens when I'm at the gym that the last two televisions where the treadmill is that I'm on has MSNBC adjacent to Fox News. So it's interesting to be able to kind of jump back and forth. And even doing that, to see a very left-wing approach to it and a very right-wing approach to it, you still can't figure out where did it go wrong. Now, certainly starting right off with Trump's presidency and the Russian, the Russian investigation made everybody have to choose, is it right or is it wrong? Are they really on a witch hunt, et cetera? And then there were several other things, but how it got to a point where literally we have people storming our Capitol and killing people, I don't know. I really don't. Maybe Sean can answer that.
Dan, and I since our last conversation and Fergal's question, I've really thought about it, and it's down to, in my opinion, it's down to nativism, in which it's a identity issue that goes back in American political history, let alone any other country. And I don't want to pick solely on America, but nativism is when the people that are in power want to remain in power and blame the other, whoever the other is. And the Irish were victims of this in the 1850s, the Irish Catholics, the German Catholics coming in. It was actually a political party established in the United States, literally called, I think, the Know Nothings. I think that was they basically were, we don't want anyone that's not like us. And this is all happening again. And that's what this is. All these people that stormed the Capitol were people who are nativists, who believe that they're the only Americans, and the actual indigenous people are the only Americans, really. And the sad thing is, this is them taking out their frustrations over, a leadership that has really given them carte blanche to do it. And it's happened before in American history. It's happening again. And there's no middle ground here. There's no middle ground. And these people, that's their mentality. And it's just, I stand to be corrected, but I think it's going to destroy the Republican Party,
Well, Joe, we're going to spend the next half an hour or so, and we're going to tease that out, if that's okay.
Sure.
The last time we were talking, it was before the election, and we said that, jokingly, we said that you were going to be our war correspondent after the election. And we were kind of fairly accurate, weren't we? You were thinking Trump, we were saying Biden, but really it was 50-50. So it was a toss-up. And our predictions about the country going up in flames, they were getting close, weren't they?
Yeah, they were very close. Yeah, and it was interesting because we also talked about the swing states and how important they were. And even though Biden was able to pull them off, he did not pull them off by a wide margin. I mean, there's several states like Arizona, Georgia, which was 10,000 votes. If you think of the size of the state of Arizona, the size of the state of Georgia, for it to come down to 10,000 in one state, 12,000 in the other. So the idea that this was going to be a landslide, and the fact that the polls at the time, if you remember, were polling 15, sometimes 17% in Biden's favor, even in some of those swing states. And I said, I don't believe that for a second. In fact, there was I think it was the day or the day before we actually aired or taped that they were saying that the 3 or 4 of the states, including Florida and Georgia and Pennsylvania, it was a dead heat, even though the polls were saying, that it was Biden by 10, 12%. So it all played out. And I was the one that predicted that if Trump lost, there would be more, people in the streets than if Biden lost. There was a lot that thought that the Black Lives Matter and some of the other movements, the regular, if you will, rioting, or protesting was going to happen. And the opposite, or what I predicted happened, I didn't think to this extent. No one in a million years would think that people would take to violence, literally like the old days, with pitchforks and nooses and wanting to hang people. I mean, it's just to a level of absurdity that embarrasses the country, embarrasses me to have to try to explain it to people that aren't from this country, and it's baffling, and it's sad.
I was saying it to you before we went on air that there was guys with Blue Lives Matters flags hitting cops with the flags.
Yeah,
so that's a level of absurdity that you just can't explain. You can't.
My predictions were spot on. We know who won. And it was never called. And I don't care how many times Trump wants to say 75 million votes. Last time I checked, 80 million is more than 75. So 80 million votes versus 75 is still more. So I think the electoral college system again was tested. In fairness, it was tested. It was significantly tested. It's never been tested to this level before, and it passed. It passed. The local electoral officials, a lot of them Republicans, followed the law, followed the rules. And there's something to be said for the strength of American democracy and democracy as a whole, that it has been tested. And what a hell of a test! But it did pass. Let's not, we can demean what happened because it was shocking behavior. But America will have a new leadership. It will have the right leadership, in my opinion, and hopefully the Republican Party can straighten their house out, because it's a house divided, it's broken, and the Democrats shouldn't revel in that, because it's not good for democracy in general to have such extremes in the country.
Tell us, Dan, did you abstain in the election, or did you vote?
I voted. I just didn't vote for the president. So I'm a, what they call a straight line balloter. So I pretty much, because a lot of times I don't follow a lot of the local politicians, and so I vote Republican for the most part, straight ticket. But I abstained from
But you're a perfect example there of how Republicans got in lower down on the ticket, and they didn't vote for Trump. So you're a great example of what happened in the election.
100%. That's why amazingly the Republicans had a great, obviously in the House. Unfortunately, ended up losing the Senate, but still, not as much as there could have been a lot more damage than there was. So I would actually consider the overall election for the Democrats. You have to say it's a win because they have the top office. But generally speaking, I think it shows that there's still a lot of flaws there. I really do. I think, Tom Frank's 100% correct when he talks about, that the people just don't associate, the white working class, which for years, diehard unionized guys that voted Democrat are now Republicans. And they have this, the same fervor for the Republican Party as they used to have for the Democrats. And again, they talk about, Biden now, this is all this is going to be is Obama 2.0. All the people he's bringing onto his cabinet, all the key positions are all former Obama guys. And so the next 2 years are going to prove out, he's got to come up with something new, because going back to Obama, and many think he was a great president. I'm not one of them. Many people thought he was, but if that's the route he's going to follow, they're going to lose big in the midterms, in my estimation.
Just a matter of interest, how did you actually feel then? I kind of got a little sense of you the last time that you weren't going to vote for Trump, but you wouldn't have been gutted if the Republicans were in the presidency. Do you know what I mean?
So again, because now the best thing that could have happened to me almost happened, which is that the Republicans kept the Senate. So that way there was a check and balance. That was the biggest problem with Obama's his first 2 years. He had all three parts, the White House, the House of Rep, and the Senate, and it just allows them to do a lot more than I would wish. Other people want it, so good for them, but I'm not one of them. In fact, $1.9 trillion bailout plan for this pandemic, that's fantastic. It really is. But is there a way to find the money? Is there a way to pay it back? We're already off of another $1 trillion, stimulus package. We know from the tax cuts that Trump made for the corporations that there's a huge deficit there as well. So there's no way you're going to convince me that taxes aren't going to go up. And for, people like my wife and I who are in a bracket that, we're going to get hammered, so it's going to hurt us, financially.
Dan, I think this is the last hurrah of sort of that. There's a big seismic shift going on. And what happened in Georgia and what happened in Pennsylvania, what happened in other states, and I agree with you wholeheartedly that the Republicans lower down in the ticket did a lot better than I thought they would. Okay. But I do think that there is a seismic shift going on, and Georgia is one of them. That Senate race, those two Senate runoffs that went to the Democrats was an excellent result for the Democrats. I didn't think that would happen. I thought they'd get one. I didn't think they'd get two. But I think that's the beginning of a shift in American politics, because the nativism that I spoke about earlier is that's why people need to realize the baton is being passed, and it's almost symbolic, in my opinion, that you have the President Biden. You have him now with Kamala Harris, and it's almost the old Irish American political establishment saying, "Okay, here's the next generation." And because the Irish American
well, you can't really say that because the guy's pushing 90.
No, but I'm saying that he represents a political force in American Democratic Party politics.
Yeah, Sean, I'm not going to agree with you on that, just because I really think that if the Democrats don't figure out literally now who they're going to start grooming for 2024, they're going to lose in a landslide.
Well,
and the Trump folks,
Kamala is going to be their nominee. She's going to be their nominee.
Then you're going to lose.
I don't think so. I think they're going to do quite well.
I'll guarantee it. I'll bet whatever you want to
we'll see,
you want to put up for that.
She's going to be the nominee, and I think that that's where this seismic shift is going to happen. And people and the Republican Party, this might have been their last hurrah. Like you can talk
I don't see it just because they have not addressed the working class people yet. They're still considered snobs. They're talked about the cabinet. I don't think there's a person yet that's been appointed to Biden's cabinet. It's not a PhD or higher. They lost their identity and they haven't got it back.
What Trump brought in?
Brought in.
They can't even spell PhD, half of his cabinet members.
No, I understand that.
Yeah.
But all he did is they're willing to dismiss that. That's a problem. His followers are willing to dismiss that. The Democrats aren't. So I think that the idea that Biden won and Trump lost, and again, it was by a much narrower margin than it should have been. The idea that that's now corrected, the Democratic Party is 100% incorrect.
No, I don't think it's. No,
I don't think they have an identity at all. In fact, I don't know if you saw in the news, Kamala's getting blown up because of her Vogue. That she's going to be on the cover of Vogue with some outfit that she did with her sorority colors, and it was just reeked of a person that came from I know she didn't, but it reeks of somebody that's wealthy, that's going to wear their sorority colors, and she picked her own background, and I think
it's a much bigger shift.
Not a working class type party.
The undercurrent of this at the state level, the undercurrent of this is massive. The demographics in the United States have shifted. They are shifting, and they will continue to shift. And that's what's going to happen.
Well, that's the problem, though, Sean, is that for the Democrats is that they've shifted to Hispanics, obviously. They shifted some to black.
It's going to win them elections. And African Americans.
The Hispanics did even better this election than they did the last one. It was unbelievable.
Texas was on a wire for the Republicans, and they just pulled it off. That's going to be gone next election run. Georgia is a big shift. Atlanta.
The Hispanics overwhelmingly voted for Trump over Biden. No, what does that tell you? And this is with a guy that literally is inciting riots.
In Florida, maybe, but that's it.
No, overall. And a lot of times it's Florida, it's Texas, it's typically very red states where there are a lot of Hispanics. I understand that, but still, the idea they haven't reached out, and that's the demographic that's growing the greatest. So I just forewarn.
How is America going to change if everybody's getting their news from their own kind of markets to actually get people closer?
It's going to get worse. I think it's going to get more extreme because once people have such hate and dislike for the other, whoever the other is, whether it's Democrat, Republican, whether it's people from America who perceive all these immigrants taking their jobs or whatever that nonsense is, it's that sort of, and it's happening around the world. Brexit has hints of that, and not hints of it. Brexit has direct impacts on that, and you talk about how nativism and people basically deciding how they perceive they want their country to be, and the others can stay away or stay out. That's where American politics has gone. It's not going there. It's gone there. And Dan and I can debate. We're like old school political people talking about Democratic Party principles, Republican Party principles. But now it's about ethnicity. It's about whiteness. It's about non-whiteness. It's about those are the differences
religion
now.
Again.
Yeah, religion again. It's becoming really, really dangerous, and the old school political conservatism versus democratic liberalism, the sort of Republican conservatism, financial conservatism, and all that sort of stuff. Those are like old arguments that nobody talks about anymore, and that's the danger. because that's what
and
politics
it is
should be
interesting when you talk about the media, because like I said, I have the opportunity, when I'm working out to have MSNBC and Fox News, literally right next to each other. And so I just flip back and forth to them. And the other day when they had the impeachment vote, it was absolutely amazing to me. You're watching Fox News, they had Karl Rovang and Dershowitz who said that they read through Trump's speech. There was nothing that incited a riot. There's no reason to be impeaching, that this is crazy and what have you. And then you get over MSNBC that's showing the people actually storming the place, the pepper spraying cops and doing whatever, and essentially saying that it wasn't an incited riot. The guy should be behind bars, and it's literally they're airing at the same time. So depending on which, if one's dedicated to one or the other, they're not getting the right. And in both cases, I think that MSNBC was represented way too left, not neutral enough, and one could argue that there's a rush to this impeachment that isn't necessary. But then you get the right hand side that says that it was actually Antifa motivated. The Democrats staged this. That this is no different a riot than the Black Lives Matter was able to have. Like it's absurd.
It's insane. But if you put people in front of this, like you can't make up what happened. What happened was Trump gave a speech that incited a group of people to take action and storm the Capitol. And as a matter of fact, his attorney general, or not his attorney general, whatever your man Cuomo is now, Giuliani.
His personal attorney.
Yeah. He literally said, he was telling people what to do, and take physical action. And, and that's recorded. That's literally recorded. That's not made up news. And
I understand that, Joe, but
I know you
Rove,
do. Yeah.
And Alan Dershowitz, one of what I always thought that he was, because complete legal scholars and former, like the idea that they said that they read through it and that, that impeachment is not the right process, that they both said that they were sick, that it happened. And thought it was wrong, but they said that what Trump did was not impeachable. Like the words,
14th Amendment,
which is just
Article 3. That's where they have them, and the Republicans need to use that because what it does, it exercises basically a ban on someone who incites insurrection against the federal system, against the United States, that they can never hold federal office again.
Correct.
And the Republicans
I think that's their greatest motivation, because most people would say, put it behind you, let the guy go off ashamed because of everybody saw what happened and what have you, but just to protect themselves. And I think they need to.
But the Republicans need to do that because he's coming back with 75 million supporters.
But I think the Republicans want that. I mean, it's amazing to me, even despite what happened in the Capitol, they only got 10 Republicans to actually agree with impeachment. I mean, Cruz is still defending him. And amazingly, Cruz got knocked off the presidential ticket by a lie. Yeah.
Trump
essentially said that his father was one of the guys that helped to assassinate JFK.
JFK,
the most absurd thing, and yet he's been one of the most loyal senators behind Trump. So, it doesn't, And I understand he's from Texas, and Texas, the good old boys, they do things a little bit different than certainly here in the Northeast. But still, the idea that you're going to go to your grave with this guy. Unfortunately, they do, and he's back in 2024. He's getting the ticket. I'm telling you.
Yeah, and it's two Americas though, then Dan and Virgil. There's two Americas now, and that's a huge issue. That's a huge issue because if I see the world, and to your points earlier, Dan, if I see the world through one lens, and that's the only true lens in my opinion, and somebody else sees it in a totally different lens, and that's the only world they see in their opinion, there is no middle ground, and that's where. The middle ground's gone. And I know, and that's
100%. And it really, there's always been a divide. We've always been divided, just you and I personally. Yeah. It's never been. And like I said in the intro, I'm not sure where exactly it happened, that it was all or nothing. I mean, it used to be that you could just like baseball. You didn't have to be a Red Sox or a Yankees fan, but certainly if you were in Boston, you wouldn't wear a Yankees hat. And if you were in New York, you wouldn't wear a Boston hat. But overall, people like baseball and they like the competition, and you can have conversations about it. It'd be like now, every time somebody saw somebody with a Yankees hat, they beat them up or wanted to incite violence on them. I mean, it's just...
Also, you could call it the footballerization or the sportization of politics.
Yeah,
so if it's your team, for example, if you're supporting a team and a guy is taken out of the penalty area, you'll always say that it was a penalty. And if your team is the defender, you'll always say, no matter what, that it wasn't.
Correct.
And that's what's happened now in politics.
It's 100%. That's a great analogy. 100%.
It's a great analogy. That hooliganism is like the word I was looking to say. Hooliganism has begun to raise its head in politics.
So it doesn't matter what actually happened. It's just you take a position, and no matter what, you stick with that.
Correct.
And that's the tricky thing, is
whether you win or lose the game, for on top of that.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
You'll complain about that penalty straight through if you lose, straight through until the match happens again, which for us is the next election. I mean, it's...
Yeah. So then the question is Biden, he is a unifier, and he was known in the Senate for being able to work on both sides of the aisle. So, maybe is he the right guy at the right time?
I kind of agree with Tom Frank that his agenda just isn't strong enough, and he isn't, he's not charismatic enough. I mean, certainly, again, Trump taking it to Twitter every day, and what he did his first 100 days is kind of absurd as well when you look at it from an extreme standpoint. But I don't know. I mean, Sean's a Dem, so he probably can answer this better. But I don't see it, and I see them having troubles in the midterm, especially keeping the Senate, and I certainly see 2024 if Harris is their is going to be their nominee, then they're going to lose it again. Hopefully it's not to Trump, but they'll lose it to the Republicans.
Yeah, I think the Democrats have to take a page out of the Republican book and not care about the other party. I think they have to say it doesn't matter anymore. They're irrelevant because they're never going to see the world our way. They're never going to see a middle ground. So let's take care of the issues we want to take care of. We've got the Senate, we've got Congress, we've got the House of Representatives and Senate. So we have Congress, we have the executive. Be damned the Republicans. Show some strength. Show some commitment to their convictions. And the Democratic Party can start arguing over the positions they hold within their own party, and maybe that'll fill some airtime. Because I think, look, it sounds harsh, but I think forget it. It's over. Forget it. You're not going to find an appeasement with the Republicans. They've shown that appeasement, they didn't appease anyone when they had power, and they were right. They did whatever they wanted, and they got more power for it, because people understood their agenda. And as crazy as some of the stuff was, it worked. And I think the Democrats have to take a page out of the Republican book and not pay heed to the Republican agenda and say, good luck. We don't want that.
So now the Democrats have, for the next couple of years, have got to get stuff done to keep their base happy, but also and show they're not socialist and get that message out. So it's a tricky balancing act.
It is as well, because I don't think people truly understand what pure socialism is.
No,
everybody said the most socialist president we had was Obama, but that's again because they view socialism as universal health care in Texas. I mean that's that, and so for that term, hopefully the Democrats can come up with a new term. I mean, Trump came up with how many new terms that he brought to the White House. Hopefully they can too, and let people understand that taxes aren't socialism and universal health care is not socialism.
I think there's going to be a sort of a Rooseveltian slant on the Democratic Party's movement into the future, because Roosevelt brought in the Great New Deal, which brought in Social Security for America. And a lot of Americans, a lot of Trump supporters are benefiting from Social Security. And a lot of people, Medicaid and the rebuilding of the creation of the American infrastructure was done by the Roosevelt administration. And you have to look at what America needs to invest in now for its own domestic needs. And a lot of it is heavy, infrastructure investment throughout the United States. And if the federal government can do that, rebrand the Democratic Party's position regarding union involvement. To your point, Dan, a lot of the union leadership have gone Republican, but you can get big jobs, big construction, new, energy efficiencies, all sorts of stuff that can happen. There could be a huge spend and a New Deal 2.0 that the Democrats could head up under the Biden-Harris administration. So it'll be interesting, but I think that's what they're going to do. And they're going to try and win back that sort of, this is what the Democrats do. They build and make America better. Sounds familiar. But that's what Roosevelt did.
So we're going to recording this on Friday, and it's going out on Tuesday, the day before the inauguration. So by then, who knows what will have happened. But do we have any idea in America? Are people nervous?
So there is a little bit of nervousness. They had it on the news this morning. I think Massachusetts is going to send about 1,500 or 2,000 of their state guard, National Guard, down to D.C. Every capital, because they're faint threats, but there are threats of still having active riots, and you can see what happened in D.C. what that turns out to be. But I think overall people understand. Trump's taken a completely different tune. They took Twitter away from him. Or Twitter took Twitter away from him, and he's been now, behind the presidential desk, saying that he never endorsed these folks, that anybody that supports him would never support violence like it happened, and so he's at least toeing the line for now. So I think it's going to be relatively uneventful. You never know, but I think it's going to be relatively uneventful because this time they're going to be prepared for it, and certainly with it coming out in the news that there were actually state or Capitol Police in DC that we're wearing, Make America Great hats again. We're allowing, people that
Selfies.
showed a badge to to essentially, walk right in to the Capitol building. They didn't have to break in. And so I think that took everybody a little bit by surprise. It shouldn't have, but it took everybody a little bit by surprise. And of course, nobody knew that Giuliani and Trump and, everybody else was going to get up there and essentially incite the riot. On top of that, people probably thought there would be some, resistance at some point and unfortunately some violence, but not to the point that it got. So, no, I think they're going to have it underhand and I think it will, be a peaceful transition, which again, it shows, as Sean said, that shows how strong, the U.S. democracy is and how, no matter what and no matter how it's tested, in the end, it does come out right. And I don't think it'll ever be tested like this again. I don't.
I hope so.
Just my interest, is Trump going to make it a pain for Biden? Is he going to be on TV from next week on,
oh yeah,
bitching?
Oh yeah,
he is.
Gotcha. Oh yeah, yeah. He'll find a way to get a Twitter. He's going to make an investment supposedly in a different, company. Although everybody says, how is he going to do that? He has no money. But I think you're going to see he doesn't go away. His ego's too big. He's not going to go away. You out of your mind? Think he's going to just go off into the sunset like Reagan until there's a library named after? I mean, come on, no way.
I heard that he wanted a military band and supporters waving him off.
Yeah. I mean, it's
following him around the golf course, but
Well, that's an interesting thing. You never brought that up, but your prediction
true.
The last time about him being on a golf course every day from the time he lost was fairly accurate. I mean, it wasn't every day, but it was every other day.
Pretty much.
Yeah, and it's interesting that he was able to lobby the PGA, the professional golf tour, here to actually have the U.S. Open next year at one of his places in New Jersey, and they've since everything happened at the Capitol have pulled that out, and they're going to move it someplace else. But just goes to show
he's more hurt about that than he is about the election. I think
he used this entire presidency to build up the Trump, the Trump enterprise. I'm 100% convinced of it. And to that point, it'll be interesting, whether or not there are, beyond being impeached, the fact that he's ready to give himself a pardon. He's already given some other people pardons. Giuliani's asked for a pardon, which, you don't do that unless you think that you've done something wrong. And I think it's only a matter of time until they investigate things like that, like how much time he spent in Mar-a-Lago and how much the taxpayers paid for those kinds of visits, overseas, what have you. I think there's a slew of things that the Trump, family and associates, can be brought up on charges, and nobody would be happier to do that than the lower court of Manhattan, who have some of the best attorneys and tend to be very left minded. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. But yeah, I don't think the Trump and the Trump family and the Trump associates are out of this criminal. That they're free of any type of charges coming forward. I think you're going to see a lot more
enterprise, and that's what they're going to have to account for. So they've done it. They've broken so many laws that they've established themselves as another family, and another crime family. So good for them. But now they're going to have to reap their rewards and hopefully spend some time in jail. So we'll see.
I mean, I have to say it's a tough job to be a president at this time. I mean, Biden, I thought he looked quite frail going up when he walks up to the podium, so.
Yeah, no, it's again, that's another thing that's in the news every day, just the fact that he's going to be older than when Ronald Reagan left office, when he starts office. I mean, that's when you think about that, because Reagan at the time was the oldest president to ever be elected. So, that's another concern people would have that if he fell ill, and Harris became the impromptu, president. She doesn't have the experience. A lot of people don't believe to be able to do it. And again,
Trump, what experience did the Trump have? Mother of God, she was a prosecutor. She's an attorney, a prosecutor. Trump, let's park that.
And a senator.
Yeah, a senator. Let's park that whole sort of logic and throw it out the window.
She never had to fire anybody on Apprentice.
Exactly. Yeah. She's never had to fire anyone on Apprentice. You're absolutely right. She's never had to sell people bad steaks in plastic bags.
Exactly. She didn't have to invent companies that went bankrupt.
Exactly. Or a university degree that wouldn't get you anywhere fast. So look, I think she's fine. I think she's more than credible and more than capable of being.
And I'm not saying that. I don't know.
I know you're not. But I think
not from
that
experience standpoint. I'm just saying that's what's going to hit what hit the midterms, and certainly what hit in 4 years. Certainly if she has 4 years under her belt as a vice president, that helps her cause. But again, she's just a little bit too left wing for what people want. They want someone like a Biden. If there was another Biden out there, and again, I would vote certainly for somebody like a Mitt Romney. who's a middle right, but at least uses his brain.
I want to get predictions so that we can come back to this because we made our predictions last time. So for the midterms in 2020, is it going to stay the houses in Democrats' hands?
So I say no. No, I say for certain that they're going to lose the Senate. I think the Republicans, I think to Sean's point, I think they lost the having control of the Senate because Trump, him trying to get the Attorney General and others to I think people that drove more people out. And despite driving people in droves, 12,000 votes, really? That's it? I think again, that those type of states are going to flip back, and so I think they'll lose the Senate for certain. I think there's a good chance for Congress as well, just because of the number of seats that are up. That Democratic seats that are up, but the Senate for certain will shift back. And then, like I said, I'm really interested in 2024, and I'll hold that judgment until the midterms in 2022 before I predict that. But I think that the Democrats have a massive undertaking to think that you couldn't line up anymore against a president, a pandemic, issues with Ukraine and Russia, North Korea, lying, being found to be sleeping with prostitutes and paying them off. Like, you couldn't line up more stuff, and they eked out a win. I mean, that shows you got a lot of problems. Good for your victory, but that's a team that needs to get back to the chalkboard and figure out a new strategy, a new way to attack the next game.
Well, I think the Democrats, my prediction is that the Democrats will come out fighting now with an agenda that is not appeasement, that is not going to be looking to, they'll use words like finding peace between the political parties and whatnot. But I think the Democrats, there's been a seismic shift, and I think it's going to be close, but I think it's unusual now during a first term of a new presidency. It's unusual for the existing party who got that presidency to win additional seats. But I'm saying it now, the Democrats will win additional seats because the polarization of American politics and the way the Democratic Party are strategically looking at saying, we're going to take a page out of the Republican Party's book, and we're going to not look for forgiveness or appeasement. So vote for us because we're moving forward. And the more vitriol comes from the Republicans and the more Trump is still around, the better it is for the Democrats. It's the way they fall on the numbers fall. This time it was more Republican seats were up for grabs.
Especially in the House. Especially the idea that they actually
and that's disappointing the Democrats.
Yeah, exactly. The Democrats ended up losing seats when the most number of seats were up for Republicans. Shows what a poor election that was for the Democrats, which again I think shows a fundamental issue in their party and their ability to identify with the voting public. I really do.
And I think that's why taking a more extreme position, the Democrats will benefit if they do that. They will benefit because to Fergal's point earlier, the appeasement didn't work. Let's work together. Let's figure it out. I think Democrats push their agenda. Don't make apologies for it. Love them or hate them. This is what they're doing, and they may actually do better.
Maybe use the word brave rather than extreme.
Yeah. Okay.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. That's fair. I think, but I guess I'm using it in the context of what's going on today in American politics. It is extreme, but I think maybe being brave or taking a very strong position regardless, and saying, come hell or high water, this is our agenda. This is what we're going to try and do. Are you with us? Yes or no?
Right. And I will say that even though I don't agree and I won't agree with a lot of his agenda, the fact that Biden is a lifelong politician is exactly what we need after having a complete Yahoo there for the last 4 years that didn't understand the politics, foreign policy, et cetera. And I think that also allows him to reach out across the aisle. I mean, other folks have tried, but you look at Bush Jr. was a governor. You look at Obama was essentially a state senator. You look at Trump didn't have an experience. So the idea that this guy was in the Senate and was respected by his peers, a lot of whom are still there, obviously, like a Mitch McConnell, I think gives him the opportunity to be able to get some stuff across the line, despite the fact that again, all it takes is a couple of Democrats to Southern Democrats to agree, and because the Senate split, and Harris has the ultimate vote. So by rule, it is but it's still a 50-50. So a couple of Democrats going one way or the other. So I think Biden's still going to have to do a lot of work, even though he owns the all three different parts of the both Congress and the White House. I think there's a lot of work still to be done on his part. But I think because of his experience and because he was respected, specifically in Congress, I think he does have an opportunity to do it. I just hope that he does, because again, all the agenda so far has been pandemic, which it should be number one issue. But that's again looks like it's going to come to, hopefully, it's going to come to some kind of an end here, in the next 4 to 6 months. And so that's that leaves another 3.5 years for him to have to come up with something better.
And it'll be the roaring 20s again all over the world. So the American economy is going to boom. Ireland's economy is going to boom. Europe's going to boom. So everything will be fine. The Democrats will do great in 2 years' time. They'll get credit for it. And I'll be back telling you how wonderful it is.
A question I keep forgetting to ask you, Dan, like when I said earlier on that 70% of Republicans felt that the election was stolen. So what's your opinion on the election? Do you think?
Well, again, I would say if you just looked at it neutrally and said in any election, right? You said a state the size of Arizona, Georgia, or Pennsylvania to be only about 10 or 12,000 votes. That would bring a concern to anybody. That are you sure you got them counted correctly, especially the mail-in? Like, how do you know that a senile old grandfather,
dude, this has happened before.
500,
500 in Florida, for God's sake. All of a sudden you guys are shocked about 10,000.
Well, and if they had said voter fraud back then, I still would have, wondered.
You would have said, "We'll take the victory." That's what you would have said.
Of course, yeah. I mean, it's not kidding, John. but again, I have to believe in the system. I have to believe in the system that if there was voter fraud, it was on both sides. So if the example they always use is, what if a senile person had a mail-in and he's a Republican, but his daughter is a Democrat, so she mails in hers and then fills out his, it just has them sign. That can happen on both sides. So at the end of the day, Biden won.
That's what I think Trump is. He knows all the stuff that's going on, and he's going, I can't believe that I was so corrupt and I faked so much. Like he tried to close the post office so that mail-in couldn't happen. Yeah. So that's why he's so upset, because he knows what was going on. He's going, I just brought 10,000 votes into Pennsylvania. What's going on? They brought 20,000?
He's a failure at corruption. He's a failure at corruption.
Well, I mean, right now he's
another successful failure.
He was able to be as corrupt as he'll ever be in a presidency, even beyond Nixon, and hasn't been tried for it yet. But so I wouldn't say he's really good at it yet, but certainly he's got away with it so far.
So you're saying in 2024 he'll really perfect it?
Exactly. He'll be back there. He has 4 years to think about all the different ways that he can get back to his base and confuse them and figure out more media. He'll be beyond Twitter by then. He'll be onto something else. I
hope he launches his campaign at the Ritz Landscaping Company's headquarters there. Yes.
So Dan, as I said, we've made our predictions for 2022, but if next week you go up in flames, we might have to do another episode next week if the inauguration is all over the gaff.
Yeah, and trust me, everybody I think internationally is going to be glued to it. So you're certainly going to know. It is something. Which again is why I think if you're Biden and you're all the key heads of states and the military and the leadership that really belongs in Washington, they're not going to let that happen. I can't imagine they let that happen. If there's a small little thing that happens in Wisconsin, or someplace else, and everybody makes the point that that these guys are rookie rioters, that the Democrats had Trump won, that the Democrats would because they've been staging protests and riots and what have you.
So we can do something well. Apparently, we can stage riots well.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's nice to know.
You guys are right now. The Democrats are very veteran, which is why the Republicans actually try to play it. Fox they actually have clips of people on Fox talking about when they were raiding the Capitol building, that was actually staged by the Democrats to make it look like Republicans, despite the fact they were all white. They had make America great. Those were all Democrats trying to make the Republicans look bad.
Yeah.
They were doing that as it was happening.
Trying to make Republicans look bad isn't difficult.
I know, you wouldn't think.
You wouldn't think. Look, it's going to be. I obviously. The inauguration is going to be a much pared down event because of COVID-19, and the Biden administration is taking that very seriously. So you're not going to have the big, huge parade type scenes.
Rows of people,
rows. That's not going to happen. So,
so you don't think there'll be any controversy about the crowd size then?
No, God, no.
Yeah, two different snapshots. One of it being completely empty, and one of it being.
The funny thing is, there'll still be more people showing up there than there was at the Trump one, even after the COVID procedures. So, look, I as long as no one gets hurt, and obviously you don't want any harm to come to anyone, it should be a safe event, and hopefully people will. There'll be plenty of police. I mean, if the DC police and the FBI and the Secret Service and the National Guard can't prevent something serious from happening, then
it is amazing. I don't know if they're doing it on purpose to get the message out, but the amount of photos I've seen of like National Guards in uniform with their guns asleep on the floors in Capitol Hill, it's probably a PR thing to keep we have people here, but still it is shocking.
It is,
isn't it?
It is, just because this is what you'd expect of a third world country, not as one of the top economic powers of the world. It's a shame it had to get to this, but it did. And you look at what happened when they had the Black Lives Matter. They brought in state militia, and the armed guards were there they were prepared for it, and they were expecting and the opposite here that they. But again, I'll be interested when the final investigation comes out. It's the idea that they actually have people on camera showing Capitol Police allowing some of the protesters into the building. Anybody that flashed a badge, they gave them
there was appeasement,
the professional courtesy of allowing them in. That kind of stuff. That just brings it to a level you would never have expected. But now that that they're taking it seriously, they're professionals at this.
Okay, guys, thanks a million. I really appreciate it, and we'll have to keep some updates going.
Absolutely.
Take care.
Thanks,
great
Fergal.
discussion.
That was
Thanks,
great.
guys.
Thanks, Dan.
I have some great episodes already recorded for season 2. Our first one will be a ski special. Stay positive, stay safe. I would ask if you could please subscribe to Apple Podcast so a new episode will appear in your library every week. I would also really appreciate if you could leave a rating and a review, as it helps others to discover this podcast. To find out who's on every Tuesday, please follow me on Instagram and Facebook at Travel Tales with Fergal. Stay safe and keep dreaming of future travels.
Travel Tales with Fergal.